We've got the wings really looking like wings. I'm very happy with progress. So join me in the video and let me show you what we've been doing. Come on then. In a similar way to the way I did the aileron spar webs, I've clamped the trailing edge section upside down, so top's at the bottom and the trailing edge is forward, and I can now mark the lines here for each of the ribs, sort of datum lines, and working through here the sort of widths which I need to cut. The only one I can't do is this one. This point here, the cut point here, will be determined out here, and because the rib's curved, slanted, this is going to be further outboard, so I won't mark the inboard end until I've got this in position on the master rib. This rib here being the master. Everything else will go, if any of these ribs are slightly out, they can be flexed to match the joints, which means that they'll then be dead straight front to rear. So I've marked the position of the cuts. That's for the master rib, just there, and I've measured back. What I've done is I've used this, which is an offcut off the end, and I matched that up with the rib profile like that, and then marked where the cut line should be, and hey ho, there we go. That should in theory all match up, and what I'll do is I'll cut down to the line with a razor saw going through on both sides, and then I'll chisel out each section. I'll show you that hopefully. And then we can dress this back nice and slowly with a chisel to make sure that we have the same gap between the leading edge of the trailing edge, the front of the trailing edge, and the rear spar all the way along, to make sure that it's absolutely dead straight and parallel. Cut these ones out. Still haven't cut this one out yet, because I'm going to put a jig piece in here to make sure this is dead straight front to rear, although it can't move an awful lot, just to make sure it is spot on, so that we have that nice fit against the fuselage side. With the trailing edge clamped to the fence on the side of my workbench, all I'm doing is I'm just cutting down through until I reach the lines there on both sides, and you'll see that the very edges just break out quite happily. So at the moment I'm just taking out the bits of wood which where I've cut it, so I'm doing it at an angle. That way I can then turn it over and go at an angle the other way, like that, and I can now clean it out with the chisel. And that's how I go about it. Do the whole lot like that. All I've done is I've got some lollipop sticks ready to go, which has just got some packing tape on one side. I can use these. I can clamp it to the rib fairly close to the back edge. I can make sure that the rib is lined up. We can do the bonding, and then I can just make sure that it holds everything nicely in line. Although, as you can tell, I've just got to free up a couple of these slots, are just a little bit too tight. I don't want it to be this tight. It's actually holding itself up in this format. But I've got the sticks. I can use that to actually adjust the trailing edge in or out a little bit if I needed to, but I've gone through and I've measured them all like that, and it's 281 millimeters for me to the front edge of the top of the trailing edge to the rear face of the spar web. So with that all set up, I'm just going to clean up a couple of these which are a bit tight so it can slip in a bit better. Remember, we need to have some room for glue. Put a square in on the master rib here, just to make sure that's staying square. And I've put this piece of wood here clamped in place just to make sure that this rib is held dead straight, and we've got a nice fit going on everywhere. It's not perfect, there is a slight gap, but as I say, we need to have some room for glue, but that, when it's in its correct position like that, it's not too shabby. The geodetic that we've got here only just fits into the slot on the trailing edge, so obviously when I put the two pieces in, I'm going to have to chamfer the edges here to half the thickness so the two pieces nest together, and I'll do that with a plane. So I want to just make up spacers for the aileron inboard rib, so it's to maintain the 1/4 inch clearance. So I've got a piece of 1/4 inch stock there, so I want it to be in the 1/4 inch to the bearing, so I've got a nice even 1/4 inch all the way along like that. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put, because this can slip in and out, I'm just going to put some washers on. I think 3 looks about the right sort of gap. I'm going to check. So I've got that clearance there now. Just oops, get a 1/4 inch would be good. And that is, yeah, the 1/4 inch is a little bit tight, which means that with a 1/4 inch in, there is actually just a very slight clearance there. So don't want it being pushed hard against the bearing. We want to have that little bit of we don't want pressure there, because that's putting a pressure actually along the bearing, which is not what it's designed for. But we want to be able to keep maintain things out. So I could almost in theory run with washers, but that would mean it might just rub on the outer race. So I'm just going to make up a little spacer on the lathe. This bearing is currently just screwed in temporarily, and I need to get the nut plate bonded on the back and have that secured, as well as with the others, so I'll do those shortly. I'm just going to make up the spacer there. There is the little spacer which I've made up. That's made up out of stainless steel. I've just chamfered the very edge here slightly, so that it's just sitting on the centre of the bearing, and it slips on nice and easily onto there. So we'll try that out and see what that's like. I won't put it in there, I'll just should be a tight, yeah. So if I push in, that's a tight fit, and put it back, yeah, it moves very slightly. So I measured it, that is 4.8 mils, so 3/16. So with that set up as it is, I can take that off now. I'm going to glue the nut plate onto the back here and put in the screws. This will actually stay permanently in there. There's no need for me to take it out ever again, as I need to actually replace it. And when it comes to me varnishing the whole thing, I'll just mask that off and put a little plug in the back to make sure no varnish spray or anything gets into the back of this little lot. And so I'll put this little lot together and use some just some thread lock on the 4mm screws there. That'll allow me to bond this rib in. While I'm doing that nut plate, I'll do the nut plate on the back of the tip rib, so it's ready to go. And also I could put it onto the end ribs so we can bolt in the stagger pin. So I'll do all of those together. I'll show you bonding those bits in, and then with that lot done, I can fit this rib and bond it here with the spacers to make sure it stays nice and square, and we can put in the web for the aileron spar. Making progress. let's crack on. I'm just going to put these nut plates on. I'm only doing the ones for the starboard wing because, as you can sort of see, I haven't fitted the trailing edge, so I haven't made up spacers or anything for the port side yet. I haven't made up the spacer yet for the starboard outboard. That will be done after I've built the aileron in situ. I'll be boring through here a clearance hole 10mm for my piece of tube, and then I'll make up the spacer, work out how much it's over length or not, depending. So for this I'm just going to put the resin, a little bit, very small amount around the anchor nut hole. I don't want squeeze out to be squeezing onto my screws, and I've actually put a small amount of beeswax on the thread of the screws which are going to go into here. So I'm going to concentrate the glue away from the actual anchor nut plate itself. I'm just putting a little bit on the very end there, just to damp it a little bit around the edge, but most of the glue is going in and around, again just around the edge here, because I don't want it actually gluing my central pivot in position. I'll put that down, and then I can put the screws through. Now these screws are slightly too short. They're just raised countersunk screws, which I'm actually using here at the moment. I'm using those because I've got them at the right sort of length, so I can actually just screw it in. It can clamp the nut plate and everything in place, which is what I'm after. So it's doing the job I want it to do, which is to hold the nut plate and everything flat in there. Not getting too much squeeze out, a little bit of squeeze out in between, which is exactly where I want it. The piece I've just put in here is a doubler going on the top of that piece of geo, and a spacer going in there for the piece of sheet which will go over here and back to the false spar, also false trailing edge here for where the vertical struts come out. Okay, let me show you what I'm trying to achieve. I want these to be sitting in, they're going to be clamped at each end nicely. But I don't want this to be a tight fit. I want it to have a little bit of wiggle room, so that when this is in, there's no pressure. They're going to be held in place by the clamps there. These ones aren't, they're just so it can actually find its natural position. And the idea behind that is not to build stresses into the geodetic at this time. All the stresses going into the geodetic should be during flight and things like that. If we put stresses in now, when I cut the aileron free, or there's much of a change in humidity, it's going to try and twist and distort. So I want this to be going together without stresses. That's a sort of important factor at the moment. Okay, so here's the step system. The beams are bonded in, and I've got the cross beams bonded in, attaching to the ribs to help support the ribs. This section here with the geodetic will also help, but they're all slightly high, so it's going to get brought down with a ream. It's not with a ream, with a router. You can sort of see that I've got sort of a cutaway there on the ends. That's just my preference to help give it a bit more of a finished sort of aspect to the pieces of wood. The top triangular sections are in as per the plans, but as you'll see now from the view going in, it doesn't really show on the plan the lower triangular sections which I've put in, and it shows that the right hand, as we're looking at it, vertical is a continuous vertical. It doesn't show that diagonal being in the way, so I've just made sure I've got a continuous vertical path going down by having a small triangular wedge at the top, going down to a beam at the bottom, going to the lower spar. And looking towards the rear, it's pretty much the same, except again I've added that sort of lower triangular section. It doesn't show that sort of end view on the plan at all. Rear entry step support. This is what we get from Fisher. Well, it's not quite what we get from Fisher. We get it slightly oversized and it doesn't have the notch, so there's no dimension on the plan. I've gone 4 inches back to put the beam there, and I'll make everything behind that a no step area, although the plywood will come all the way down, all the way to the back. You'll notice I've put a notch in here, and that's because I've put a bit of extra support in. Here on the trailing edge I've put in a strip of wood that will support the plywood back edge here, to help give it a good mating surface and a contact area with the trailing edge. And the triangle section will come in under here and be bonded to it, and then everything will be routed so it's got the right clearance. So there's still a bit of work to do on the routing side, but that just gives some support for the plywood going along there, with the step going underneath, so hence the notch. At the front end here there'll be 2 sections of triangular section going down as per the plan for supporting those ribs there. Got all this geodetic completed on the ailerons. Well, not a bad production week. Got all the trailing edge geodetic in, so see how far we get next week, and we're getting cracking. It really is starting to look like a pair of wings. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you next week. Bye now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up. You can subscribe or even hit the little bell notification for future videos. Any comments would be appreciated, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Remember, go fly and feel the sky.